Hello, I'd like to tour you around a 3-hour e-learning module that I created for the role of Acquisition and Integration Vice President. And this is role-based training that was developed for the role which actually integrates software companies which are acquired by a company known as ESW Capital. So bear with me, this will follow the entire phase from the time the letter of intent is given to the company and follows it through to when the company goes through the processing into the central factory from the original owner. How everything kind of works, the whole acquisition process from A to Z. So there's basically 3 key phases. They changed it quite a bit from the time that I was on this project, which was about 10 months. And my last training that I implemented for the new integration vice presidents was a 3-phase acquisition process. So it starts with their pre-close phase, actually pre-letter of intent, and a pre-close phase and a post-close phase. And it shows the 7 assembly lines. So it starts with the target company, which is being acquired by this particular capital group. So I used a label graphic here for the acquisition process. And then I explained our pre-LOI phase, and I take it kind of all the way through pre-close phase, explain it. I use a lot of links because there is a lot to know here, and the intention of this training is to make sure that anyone who's being hired knows what kind of gap analysis is done, knows how to explain the gap analysis, and so forth. Just understands how everything works and how the project basically rolls from its pre-close phase, the number of weeks, and when we say week -4, week -3, week -2, week -1, simply because the company has not been acquired just yet. And a post-close phase, and then once the decision is made and the money actually exchanges hands between this particular capital group and the actual company, what's known as the target company that's being bought, that's when the integration part can start. And we know that there are 7 assembly lines, which I explain. And then once that process is done, which is typically 90 days, it goes to a central model, which is call it central factory. So it's basically taking the whole company through a process. So I explain that there. And then I go into detail about the phases of the acquisition. A little more carefully, this is a little bit redundant, but its intent is to just show in more detail the weeks and what happens, the close phase and the end of integration, and how the assembly lines work. Kind of a unique process particular to this particular, being repetitive to this particular company. They kind of develop this over time. Starts with the banker, they find the company that wants to be sold. Could be they're not doing well. Could be a lot of reasons why they actually want to sell their company. And there's different purchases that this particular capital group looks for: asset purchase, all the assets, or divestiture, insolvent purchase, direct stock purchase. Maybe it's a merger. It could be a number of reasons. Some are a lot more complex. I put a sample of the letter of intent here too. Don't want to click into it because it's proprietary. And of course, this can change any given day. It's a dynamic organization that's constantly changing their process. So go into detail about the due diligence process, exclusivity periods, post-close data ask phase. Okay, so then after that, I go into more detail about what happens during a pre-close. And this basically means, the pre-close basically means the company hasn't been bought. Now it's between the integration vice president, the target company that wants to be sold, and all the work streams that are involved in the process. And what they're doing is they're examining the accounting, they're examining the code for the software that the company produces. They're usually software companies. Some of them will involve hardware. And there's a lot of them, there's telecom companies, there's surveying companies, there's social media type companies, and they all have their unique issues. So they all need to be carefully examined during the due diligence process. So that's what we call our pre-close phase. Then of course I go into what a gap analysis is, what's fit for central factory, cost determinations, quality determinations, that sort of thing. Post-close process, when the go decision. This is once the go decision has been made, the money's going to be changing hands between the banker and the target company. And what the key items happen. Just to get people familiar with what happens, clone specs, those are basically duplicates of all the code that the company has. They replicate their product line. Oops. So it's just kind of phase by phase training. And of course, this is not meant to be anything hands-on. It's just like a broad overview. I've also created a lot of hands-on checklists that are more project management approaches to training. I do live training with the tools that they'll be using. And in lesson 6 of lesson 25, I talk about the integration process with the 7 assembly lines. 7 assembly lines are. We have engineering, finance, HR, and legal, integration, product management, SaaS ops, sales management, services, and out of model is when they're still going to buy the company, but they're going to send it to a business unit to run. And then I go into detail. For this particular training, I recorded videos, presentations for each assembly line and how they work. Did it all from scratch because before I was hired, this company actually didn't have any training for their integration vice president at all. So here I talk about exactly what the integration vice president is. They coordinate all the work streams and they're responsible for these particular items. They set the integration budget, they work on the gap analysis, they create the lessons learned document. We have engineering, and I explain the concept of SE7. What is SE7? It's basically ship every 7. It's a kind of a quality control or a productivity mechanism. And I explain it here. Complete process, which is continuous innovation, continuous development, continuous improvement, source code migration, quality assurance, and so forth. The ship every 7 assembly line, I recorded a video for that, did the graphics. So this can demonstrate some of my skills with graphics. I did full training for HR too and finance. What is a model exception report? And that is some extra fees that are going to be incurred when we buy the company. And I worked on this too. Kind of explanations of what customer support is, professional managed services, and SaaS ops assembly line, SaaS operations, database consolidation, IT operations, what they are, what they mean to this process. Because for this particular organization, they have work streams that are also relevant once the company gets absorbed by their central factory. And this is product management services assembly line. We're talking about clone specs. Well, what are clone specs? What are P2 specs? What do they mean? There's company level specs, there's rewrite specifications. Most common during integrations are clone specs, and then there's change specs. When a product line is going to change, maybe we're going to remove a service. Maybe that's not useful anymore, or maybe they started developing but they didn't release the particular upgrade yet, and we don't want it. Could be anything. So I did a little video about what product management is, what it means during the acquisitions integration process, and sales and management assembly line, and of course we have our out of model process. So I explain that, and then I talk about communications with the target company, because it's a very uncomfortable process when, say, your company's being bought, you most likely will be laid off. If you're key personnel, you could keep your job, but then you have to renegotiate your salary. And this particular organization only has remote workers for the most part. They have executive staff in Austin, Texas, but most people become remote, and a lot of people don't want to work remote. So integration in model state for successful closure, what that means, what analysis, all the different processes that are involved, fairly extensive, and what out of model means. And they were very stringent about legal process training. because if they were to hire some of our legal team to train these new people, they have a very large fee. So what I did was I took a lot of the legal disclosure information, the training, I linked the guide, I hashed it all out and put a recording here where I talk about
today I'd like to
what
discuss disclosure skills.
That's me.
This lesson is regarding this particular topic. So this is where you're going to be looking at.
So here I'm talking about the IP. I'm talking about the intellectual property, everything that needs to be handled during the acquisition process. I know nowadays a lot of AI, artificial intelligence, is kind of taking this process over, but so that's how that works. And good to know items. And I did have a separate module. This is all broken out too in separate modules so people can access it. Pre-close phase communications. I use a label graphic for this. It shows the process that the IVP is responsible in managing the communications. And that's all the teams that work for this particular organization known as ESW Capital. They are not really in communication with the target company. It's usually all funneled through the integration vice president. So that's why I put like a cone. It's called the cone of silence. So we use this little cone. Okay. Of course, it's not terribly interactive, but this is just kind of flat training. I do a lot of interactive stuff in Storyline 360. And then I like to do a little quiz, kind of a knowledge check. At the end of this particular e-learning, I uploaded into Docebo, and in Docebo I have a 50-question test. They all have to pass at 80% or more. So here we go with our little questions. And then since SE7 is a relatively new concept, I have a separate training for what is SE7, what purpose of SE7 is, what it all means, ship every 7, and do a knowledge check on that, because that's the core of the company, is really SE7. Ship every 7, you need to produce something every single week. And another core process, of course, when you're buying a company, there's something called a knowledge transfer. So I call it the legacy to ESW knowledge transfer. And again, I had to create all from scratch. There was nothing before. They always did pairing, of course, because the knowledge has to be transferred, but you can only imagine the problems when your company's being acquired. They need to, I'm working for the company for 20 years, I need to transfer my knowledge to somebody new because I'm probably going to be losing my job, or maybe they're going to be hiring me. So it gets to be somewhat of a messy process, so it has to be organized in a very, very meticulous way. You have a navigator, a driver, and then you have a navigator and driver. Sometimes there's 2 and 2, and they have to organize all these meetings through GoToMeeting or Zoom or any kind of online conference tool. And so I have to make a video on how this whole process works. Exactly what pairing is, and show the navigator and the driver. And understanding pairing sessions, how to organize them. I advised a lot of the engineering teams to add an HTML tag to organize their pairing sessions so they can search for the key item, because all these pairing sessions are basically recorded and put into an archive. And if you don't, unless you take copious notes, if you don't put an HTML tag on the time, it's going to be cumbersome to find the key point. Okay, so that is that process. And then when I was hired at the company, I implemented the learning management system. I chose Docebo because it had a wide range of APIs that I thought were useful during the pairing process, like live training within the system that can be recorded and saved. I called it Central Training, and that was the official learning management system. I did a recording for that too. It was only a minute. This might be interesting for you to watch, because this is what I did.
large volumes of complex data.
Here's where I actually talk more about the learning management system that I implemented, potential training.
Main course support and choosing your main branch.
So here I explain how the learning management system works, and it was something they didn't have before. They didn't have lesson plans, and they are absorbing some sizable companies, to be honest with you. So that is the training for our learning management system. Monitoring and control is basically the tools that will be used by the IVP and the process, which is a quality process. I talk a lot about that. Unique to ESW, it's taking each business value and putting it through a metric test and adding it like a business value. And I show examples of that. How you take information, like if you're going to migrate a legacy company's code to, say, GitHub or what have you, that turns into a quality bar. Has that been done? And once that's been done, that's like a metric, and a metric that has to be achieved. Not like a task. They didn't like the project management task aspect, so they subsequently changed task and subtask to quality bar and subtask. So basically how the quality bars were developed, the input process and the outputs, like a factory. So I developed this process with my team, and how it's executed, how it's planned, and how it works within Smartsheets and the Jira ticketing system. Okay, then I do a knowledge check on that. Then I talk further about the tools that are used to track the progress of the project, because we have a 90-day process, kind of like our deadline that we need to meet. And how these tools work in the process. I also talk about Confluence. There's a Confluence page for each company that is acquired. And these are the tools: Jira, Betterworks, and Smartsheets. Okay, and then I talk about how they all work together. Show the process, the workflow process, who does what the project management team does, what the finance team does, what the IVP does, and so on and so forth, how everything flows. That and how the dashboards work, because the business units want to know how fast this company is being absorbed into the system. They're the ones that have to maintain the operation when it goes to central factory, keep the clients, and kind of monitor any type of problem going on. Go into detail more about Smartsheets and Jira, which they're pretty simple to use, but we have our unique workflow. It was so different, I had to make a complete video on how each ticket flows. I also created a end-to-end import detailed Confluence page, or a template documentation page. So if I am a new IVP and I come into an acquisition and it's already 30 days into it, I can go to this documentation page, and it's already tells me everything that's going on. I have links to its Smartsheet reports. I have the entire process here. The teams, what phase they're in, and so on and so forth. In another lesson, I talk about business value calculations. That's lesson 22 of my 25 lessons. How each particular work stream does their budgets. So this is like an end-to-end A to Z training on the acquisition of a company and how it's absorbed and how it works. So it's unique. 12 sets of criteria for the project budget Smartsheet. The criteria is, of course, the finance team, the PMTR, who does what. It's very helpful to know. This is a decent orientation if you're good at this type of learning. And then, of course, you get paired up with an IVP who will train you hands-on. Schedule variance. Did a video on that, how that works within Smartsheets, what it means. Some of these concepts are going to be new to the people being hired. So that is it. So that was role-based training that I put together. I used Articulate Rise, and it was very easy to understand and use, and it was very helpful for the new people being hired. Thank you.